A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
I am happy once again to welcome you to our podcast, The Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions. I am your host, John Freedman. Allow me to say a few words about our project, which is presented by Ukrainska Pravda, Ukraine's most popular internet portal. In 9 separate podcasts, we are offering readings and discussions of 9 works by 9 authors, all of whom are members of the Theater of Playwrights in Kyiv. Furthermore, they all contributed texts to an English-language anthology titled A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War, 20 short works by Ukrainian playwrights. This award-winning collection was compiled and edited by yours truly and published in 2023 by the Great Laertes Press in the United States. Every text in the book was written in 2022 in response to the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. In today's podcast, we offer a compelling monologue titled Call Things by Their Names by Tetyana Kytsenko. Tetyana is a playwright who debuted with the play Three Nietzsches in 2011. She is now the author of over a dozen plays that have been performed throughout Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. Her plays have won awards at numerous play competitions, including Contemporary Play Week, the Drama UA Festival, and the Coronation of the Word Contest, all in Kyiv, as well as at the Free Theatre Competition in London. Since it was written in 2022, Call Things by Their Names has been performed 30 times in 9 countries as an entry in an international program that I curate called the Worldwide Ukrainian Play Readings. Tetyana has written several plays that deal with the trauma of the full-scale Russian invasion, including The Cross, Granny Toma, and It All Remained in Mariupol. In 2017, Tetyana told Kritika magazine that real theater is psychotherapy, an enormous personal work for all its participants, including the audience. Such art makes us stronger, moreover, almost invincible. Our performer today is Joe Spano. His 6 decades as an actor have seen him compile a biography that anyone would admire and maybe even envy. He has over 90 credits in television and cinema, and he has been a founding member of at least 5 theaters, including the Berkeley Repertory Theater in the San Francisco Bay Area. He performed alongside Tom Hanks in the Hollywood hit Apollo 13, after which Hanks called Spano his first serious role model and source of inspiration as an actor. That is no faint praise. Spano was a member of the core cast for the entire run of the legendary American cop series, Hill Street Blues. He has been a core cast member of the equally popular NCIS series for all 22 years of its ongoing run. Joe made his Broadway debut in 1992 in Arthur Miller's The Price, alongside the fabled American actor Eli Wallach. Among Joe's many awards are a coveted Emmy for excellence in acting for television in 1988 and an LA Drama Critics Award in 1989. Please stay tuned now for Joe Spano's reading of Tetyana Kytsenko's Call Things by Their Names, followed by Joe's and my discussion of his thoughts about Tetyana's work.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
Call Things by Their Names. Tetyana Kytsenko. A warning. When I was a teenager, my family lived in the small town of Zhdanivka in the Donetsk region. The city of Zhdaniv was 200 kilometers away on the shores of the Sea of Azov. Confused tourists heading for Zhdaniv regularly arrived at our bus station in Zhdanivka. In 1989, Zhdaniv was renamed Mariupol, and we seriously discussed whether we might change the name of Zhdanivka to Mariupolivka. That never happened. But in 2017, Marshal Zhukov Street, where I lived in Kyiv, was renamed Kuban of Ukraine. Around the same time, the street named for the January uprising of 1918 was renamed in honor of Ivan Mazepa, while Moscow Prospect was renamed after Stepan Bandera. In those days, there were still many renamings going on within the framework of decommunization, villages, streets, metro stations, and at first it was confusing and annoying, but the new names took root because they are ours. Honestly, I would rename many other things. Soviet champagne, Zhiguli, Russian beer, Russian cheese. Being a rational person, I would advise these manufacturers to change their names urgently. Otherwise, their products will just rot in warehouses because those names will get stuck in everyone's throat. As I have been writing this text, Russian cheese was renamed anti-Russian.
Еще раз обращаюсь ко всем гражданам России. Благодарю вас.
Then there are a number of cases where renaming is a debatable issue. For example, Putin for Hitler. After a detailed study of the issue, I don't believe they should be equated. The Nazi leader was incompetent, but an artist. He at least had some traces of taste. Before plunging his people into an abyss, Herr Adolf managed to paint a convincing picture of the future. Finally, in defeat, he had the courage to lay hands on himself. True, only after the fall of Berlin, but still, that wasn't bad. As a zealous officer of the FSB, Putin possesses not a single hint of creativity. He never speaks a word of the future, only about the great past, and not even of the Soviet period, but of days when toilets were a hole in the ground. You find yourself listening to the demented delusion of this old man, and you realize the hell he will lay hands upon himself. No, he'll throw nuclear bombs at the entire world. Wouldn't you say that Putin is worse than Hitler? The immutable Russian president is a monkey playing with a nuclear button while sitting on a gas tap. For the safety of everyone, we must disassemble this three-pronged entity forever. To be honest, I didn't believe until the last moment that Putin's Russia would attack Ukraine. But when my wife and I leapt up at 5 a.m. on February 24th, from the sound of exploding cruise missiles, we knew what was going on even without news reports. Was this a special operation, a conflict, or a crisis? No, not one of these words came to mind. And if such diplomatic definitions are rinsed of their hypocrisy, you will be left with the old standard: war. War is when you are going west through Hostomel, and a downed helicopter catches fire right above your head, and you rejoice because it belongs to the enemy. It is when you sleep in the bathtub at night, wake up from the bombs and feel the walls vibrating. It is when you live in the subway for 4 weeks, know how to distinguish Grad rockets from bombing strikes, but don't know if your house survived. Also, when your relatives from Russia say it's all fake. How did it happen that calling things by their proper names became a civic feat in Russia, Belarus, and a few countries in the West? Why such inflated criteria for the truth? It seems so obvious to declare a war, criminals, criminals, and heroes, heroes. It is important to name the number of dead, captured, and even those Russian soldiers who refused to return to Russia after we try them for the crimes they committed. Let them rebuild what they destroyed. Then maybe they can remain with permanent residence status, if they're willing to learn Ukrainian. Of course, everyone in Ukraine will understand Russian, but will a Russian understand anything here? I remember in 2007, a journalist from St. Petersburg's Sasha came to work in Kyiv for a Russian language publication. For a couple of weeks, he complained how difficult it was for them. But the last straw was when Sasha went to do an interview and spent an hour looking for Red Banner or Krasnonamenia Street, not even guessing that he was walking on it. After all, the street signs bore a radically different name, Chervono Prapona, that is, Red Banner Street in Ukrainian. Incidentally, it is now called Pirohovsky Lane. Russian soldiers thought if they got into trouble, they would be able to blend with the crowd in any Ukrainian city. But we all remember how the locals, seeing a man with a shaved head and wearing someone else's clothes, shouted at him, "Hey, say, Palyanitsia!" That is bread loaf in Ukrainian. But a Russian simply can't say this because Ukrainian requires different adjustments of the oral apparatus. Language has become a password, an identifier, our system of recognizing our own from the intruder. But here's what I think. Even if a Russian understands the language, will they really understand Ukrainian? It's not even a matter of the meaning of the words, but what stands behind them. Take, for example, our leading national virtue, sincerity. It's not just a matter of being frank. It is an odd fusion of cordiality and breadth of soul mixed with frank honesty, the ability to call things by their proper names. I would require exams to prove people know such things. By the way, about names, I've noticed one interesting nuance. It's not so recognizable in everyday life, because I speak both Ukrainian and Russian. But when I'm talking to my English-speaking friends, I get very irritated when they call Mykola Hohol Nikolai Gogol, using the Russian version of his name. Listen up, folks. He's Mykola Hohol. That other name is something else entirely. The difference of a few letters is enough to embrace an entire world view.
A dictionary of Ukrainian emotions.
Hello, Joe Spano. It's an evening where I am. It's morning where you are. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure, John. My pleasure.
You did a beautiful reading of Tetyana Kytsenko's piece, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your work on that. But before I do that, I want to just... You personally have an incredibly fascinating biography, starting out with improv and then helping to found a theater, the Berkeley Rep, and then going to television and film and continuing your theater work on Broadway and everywhere else. It's you have had quite an arc in your acting career.
Yeah, it's a little bit overwhelming when it's put in front of my face like that. I don't remember all of it, but I do know I've been very lucky to be able to be doing something I love. That is really something that people do not often get a chance to do.
And I pulled up this quote. This is your quote. I'm going to quote you now because I just thought this fits so perfectly with the project that we're doing. And here's what you said. I hope you said this. That's what I'm claiming anyway. The real hopeful thing about the arts is that you take painful experiences and shape them. You come out of an experience like this not devastated, not demolished by it, but hopefully healed or having experienced a catharsis. First of all, I'm curious what prompted you to say that?
I don't remember the moment that it said that, but it sounds like something I said or would have said. We're in this place at any given point, and there is a lot of, if you're human, there is a lot that is painful. And there are many ways to deal with them. And actors, what I find acting to be, is a way of using that pain for something purposeful. One of the purposes is to make me feel better. And one of the other reasons is to make other people feel better and to find a place where it's easier to see the totality of now, which is not always painful and not always joyful.
Right. In this case, in Tetyana Kytsenko's text, Call Things by Their Names, we're not talking about, particularly joyful experiences. We're talking about thoughts that came to the author literally weeks, maybe even days after a neighboring country attacked her homeland of Ukraine. It's a piece that talks about the renaming of things and places and the claiming of them for one's own. And there's a couple of things. There's a lovely phrase in the piece. The names took root because they are ours, she writes, meaning the renamed Ukrainian names, replacing the ones that were before. The names took root because they are ours. I just happened to run across a quote when I was looking through stuff that Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the great American judge who was on the Supreme Court many years ago in the United States, he said, words have meanings and names have power. You put these two notions together. On the surface, it looks like a piece about names and changing them. And it's actually an attempt to reclaim one's own land, the place where one lives. It's a way of dealing with that trauma that you're talking about.
Yeah, it is. It's a revolution. It's a statement of who we are, of our identity. It's interesting because there is so much in common. It seems to me, I don't know a lot about the relationship between Ukraine and Russia, but there's a lot in common, too. It's difficult not to make the case, but to distinguish yourself, is which we all do, those of us in the arts, I think we do, I certainly did, is I wanted to be somebody, not in the sense of famous, although I'm sure I wanted that too, but I wanted to find out who I was, and what I had to give is part of that. Who are we? And why is it so important to some people? And how do some people and some countries find the freedom to actually be something that they wanted to be, rather than something that somebody else wanted them to?
Right. And, in this case, I mention this actually quite often because I think it's an important basic starting point for any conversation about what is happening in Ukraine right now. And that is, not long before the full-scale invasion began, Putin declared in an official speech, in an official text, he declared that there was no such thing as Ukraine, there was no such thing as Ukrainian culture, there was no such thing as a Ukrainian language. They are all ours, he said. They are all Little Russian, to use a phrase that actually takes us back to the 19th century and earlier. So, you talk about we want to find out who we are. The Ukrainians right now are in this incredibly terrible fight to have the right to determine themselves who they are, what language they speak, on what land they live, and what their culture is. Again, this seemingly simple story about names and place names and street names and everything that you read, it really digs down deep into that. And this is an author that knows I am Ukrainian and the people around me are Ukrainian.
Yeah, it's interesting, given where we were raised, we came up. It's something that I don't think we as Americans can really get a sense of very well. Because we are and have always been, I think, in some stage of conflict with whatever Russia seems to be at any given time. The art of Russia is something we, particularly as people in the theater, cherish. Opera and ballet, it's something that we are more familiar with as an entity than, at least for me, as is Ukraine.
Right. Which is one of the purposes, I will say immediately, one of the purposes of this podcast and of the book that I did, A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War, is to bring Ukrainian voices and to bring Ukrainian sensibilities to the world in a way that really hasn't been done before. I had an exchange with Maxim Kurychkin, the playwright who was one of the founding fathers of the Theater of Playwrights in Kiev. I told him, you guys, this was way back 2.5 years ago. I said, you guys are standing at the threshold of a nation and a culture that you're going to build now, which is what the United States attempted to do in 1776 and has attempted to do many times since. I think that's necessary to say. I would say that in 2024, we are attempting to do it, for the umpteenth time. I'm not as interested in the U.S. as I am about Ukraine. Their writers and their painters and their musicians and all of their artists, they are poised to create the culture that will become the Ukrainian culture of the future and the one that will differentiate it from the one of the past.
Yeah. And that's true about here and now. Some people are trying to change what has been American for my whole life.
And define that, Joe, in 3 words, 10 words, 5 words, 7. What is your America?
I'm a congenital Democrat. And that says a lot, I think, to people who hear it. And that's because my father was he was born here, but his mother and his sisters were born in Italy. And they came here and they did what they had to do to be who they were now and how to live in a different world, take advantage of it, also be part of it, to change it, and to be grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, you see, that is precisely what I'm talking about. 1776 was one of those inflection points when the country had to decide for itself who it was, and Americans had to decide who they were. It happened with the big wave of immigration from Europe at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. My forebears came over at that time. Our grandparents or parents or, whatever those generations are, they were in the process of creating a new America. And as I say, I believe we are doing the same now. The pieces, the little bits and pieces that are being written by Ukrainian writers and the paintings that are being made, the plays that are being written, these are things that Ukrainians of the future will be coming back to see, oh, here's kind of where it started. Here's where we took a really sharp turn away from our past. And this is where we began to begin to really question ourselves and figure out who we are and where we're going. It's a daunting time for a culture, and we are here watching it unfold, and we are here watching it happen. I find it absolutely fascinating.
It is true, and it's a culture that is very astute and capable of communicating to us what is different about them.
I haven't said it, and it's necessary to be said, that Ukrainian culture has extremely strong signposts. And there were great writers and great poets already by the 19th century early and mid 19th century. And so it has been developing, but it never had the opportunity to develop because Russian czars would outlaw the use of Ukrainian language. They would outlaw the publishing of books in Ukrainian. It has been a hounded culture and a hounded language, actually, for many centuries. But this moment that we're in right now is surely one of the greatest, most drastic turns in their history.
It would be interesting to find out what you just said true, that it has had a distinction for a long period of time, which I don't know about. Ukraine is just a word to me. Has been, before now, not as large as it is now in terms of our knowledge of it. You could probably talk for hours about what makes Ukraine, and always has made Ukraine.
I want to thank you once again for doing such a beautiful reading of a very strong and powerful text, which helps bring to light much of what we have been talking about. And very grateful that you joined us. And thank you once again. I hope you enjoy it when you get a chance to hear it yourself.
Well, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to learn more.
Certainly, Joe. Thank you so much.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
And so now we have worked our way through the fourth entry in the Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions series of podcasts. In all, we are offering 9 texts written by founding members of the Theater of Playwrights in Kyiv. All of them are published in English in the anthology titled A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War, 20 Short Works by Ukrainian Playwrights. As does Tetyana Kytsenko's Call Things by Their Names, which you have just listened to. Every one of these texts stands as proof of the power and resilience of the Ukrainian spirit, the riches of its culture, and the beauty of its language. Our next podcast will feature the Scottish actor Kevin McMonagle performing Andriy Bondarenko's Survivor's Syndrome, a powerful, poetic piece about losing and regaining one's life in a time of war. Please log on to hear that. And thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it. I am your host, John Freedman.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.